Hello and welcome to the Julia Hartley-Brewer show on YouTube and on podcast. This is the show where we try to get to, well, the inside story about the news and what's really going on. Don't forget to share online using the hashtag JHBShow. And if you enjoyed the conversation, please do like, review, comment and most importantly, subscribe to the Julia Hartley-Brewer YouTube channel and the podcast. That's going to really help other people get to listen to the conversation. My guest today is an ardent Brexiteer, a free marketeer and someone who's never shy about telling it like it is. International Trade Secretary and Minister for Women and Equalities Conservative MP Liz Truss. Welcome.
Great to be here, Julia.
Well, indeed. I mean, you have something of the same, I suppose, Marmite appeal as I have. People seem to either love you or hate you. How do you think it's going to go in the general election that's just been called?
Well, I think the worst thing is to be bland, because what's the point of being in politics? What's the point of, getting on with your life if people don't know what you think, if you're not prepared to stand up for what you believe in? So I've always believed in being clear about what you think and what you want to do.
OK, well, let's talk about what is imminently about to happen. A general election finally called December the 12th. We're going to find out what the result is on Friday the 13th of all dates. Are you worried, though, that this election is happening in the wake of the Prime Minister, your party leader, Boris Johnson, failing to deliver on his do-or-die pledge? Well, he said he'd rather be dead in a ditch than ask for an extension, dead in a ditch rather than deliver Brexit any date after October the 31st, but he's not going to do it.
The reason we're having this election is this zombie parliament has failed to vote for anything. They failed to vote for the programme motion, which would have seen Boris's excellent Brexit deal take place before the 31st. They've tried to take no deal off the table. They took the decision out of the Prime Minister's hands. So we've had no choice but to call a general election. I think the public can see exactly what's going on in Parliament, which is there are Labour MPs who claim they want Brexit, but will do nothing to actually deliver it. So this is why we need an election. We need a majority Conservative government that is going to deliver, first of all, on Brexit, but then all the opportunities that spring from getting Brexit done. And we've got to the point where Parliament is at hugely low levels of respect. The people voted to leave the European Union 3 years ago. It hasn't been delivered. We've got a Prime Minister with oomph, with razzmatazz, who wants to get on with it, but is being held back by Parliament. And I think certainly when I travel around the country, I was in West Yorkshire last week, that is what people were telling me, that they support the Prime Minister in what he's doing. They want to see him freed from the shackles of this zombie parliament so he can deliver for the country.
It's not even 2.5 years since the last general election, and last time round in 2017, Brenda from Bristol famously said, oh no, not another one. Do you think, though, that the British public are ready to take the plunge with another general election because of issues like Brexit, because we've got, as you say, a parliament that's a hung parliament can't get anything done?
There's a completely different mood in the country now. People understand that this situation can't continue, where you've got a Prime Minister who, against all odds, negotiated a new Brexit deal with the EU, giving us the ability to strike our own free trade deals, giving us the ability to leave the European regulatory system. People understand he's got that, but he can't get it through Parliament, and that is why we need this election.
Well, there's no doubt at all the Labour Party were dragged kicking and screaming into voting. 100 Labour MPs didn't vote for there to be a general election. The SNP and the Liberal Democrats have their own reasons to want a general election. But of course, there is going to be that concern about the polls right now. Boris Johnson, the Tory party, you're ahead in the polls. However, Theresa May and the Tory party were even further ahead in the polls by some sort of 7 or 8 percentage points at this time in the electoral cycle, ahead of a general election campaign in 2017. Why are you so sure that a general election is going to resolve this and we're not going to end up in a few weeks' time back exactly where we started with another hung parliament?
I agree with you. You can't just look at the polls and project that onto what's going to happen. But certainly when I meet people around the country, what they're telling me is they want to move on. They want Brexit done. They want to move on. There are all these other opportunities. One of the things I'm working on is free ports, which would have huge benefit for places like Liverpool and Teesside. They can see those opportunities and they're frustrated by Parliament. So I think we're in a very different position from 2017. And we've also got a Prime Minister who's a great campaigner. You're going around with Boris Johnson, you can't get anywhere because people want selfies with him. There's a huge...
He also is another Marmite character. I mean, he was very popular in 2008 and 2012 for the London mayoral elections. 2012 is a long time ago, and crucially, the Brexit referendum happened in between when he was seen as a very polarising figure, crucial for winning the referendum on the Leave side, which you were campaigning for. But now he's seen as much more divisive.
I don't think that is true when you move outside the sort of Westminster bubble where we get all these sort of slagging off and attacks. If you go into the types of places the Conservatives need to win at the election, Wakefield, Dewsbury, Bishop Auckland, people there connect with the Prime Minister, they understand what he's trying to do. And what they also understand is that he's proud of Britain. He's optimistic about Britain's future, and there's an awful lot of negativity on the other side of this argument. The idea that Britain can't go it alone, that everything's going to be terrible, that we need to spend more time having a second referendum. I mean, I think that's the last thing people in Britain want. I haven't asked Brenda from Bristol what she thinks about a second referendum, but the idea that we need to be in this sort of analysis paralysis where we're not quite sure what we're doing, I think people are fed up with that, and they see Boris as somebody with the optimism and the vision to actually deliver for Britain.
Now, this is something that
they
Brexiteers
want to be proud of their country.
Well, this is it. Brexiteers get a lot of criticism for, if you vote with your head, you think about the economics. Remain is better than Brexit, and we were accused in 2016 and ever since of not really, thinking about the facts and the realities. But so much about Brexit and being a leaver, and you were an ardent leaver and have been for some time, it is about, I suppose, a positive view of your country. So much the Remain view is about just thinking we're a bit of we're old news. We're not a very important country anymore. We can't hack it on the global stage anymore. We need the EU to have any clout to do anything whatsoever. Why do you think people have such different views of our country?
It is a really interesting question, but when I travel the world as Trade Secretary, the view of Britain is it's the 5th biggest economy in the world. Everybody wants to do a deal with us. They see us as a trusted country with exciting products, exciting ideas, great culture. They want to have a share of that. They want to work with us. And I visit countries like Australia, which is a much smaller economy than Britain. Australia strikes its own trade deals around the rest of the world. It's perfectly capable of going it alone. They've got a Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, who is proud to be a Conservative, proud of Conservative values like low taxes. And it's a puzzle to me why there are still quite a lot of people in Britain, despite the size of our economy, despite the fact that we are a global nation. Britain is a very well-known country around the world, who think that somehow...
Soft power and hard power.
Yeah, so that somehow we need to... and of course we want a good trade deal with the EU. We want to trade with the EU, don't get me wrong. But we don't need to be part of their regulatory system. We don't need to have, the European Court making decisions over what happens in the UK. We don't need that.
But you came from a very ordinary background. You didn't come from the public school Oxbridgey route. You did comprehensive school before going to Oxford. You grew up in a left-wing household. You had a mum who dragged you along to CND
my
rallies.
My first experience was going on a CND rally. My first political experience with people shouting "ban the bomb" and all this kind of stuff,
so
and standing outside a naval base. Bizarre. How
did you get to the politics where you are a Conservative, B, a free marketeer? Because those aren't necessarily the same things, and C, a Brexiteer. What was your journey to believing in all those things?
Well, I think, first of all, I just was hugely interested in politics when I was growing up. My mum was in the CND. She used to talk all the time about the Cold War, and we talked about it a lot in our house. And it was a really interesting time in politics because there was a big ideological battle, and I think that's where we are again. I think we've been through, frankly, quite a boring 30 years, and now we're back in talking about the big ideas, which I find really exciting. But my fundamental political belief is that people should be free to live their own lives as they see fit. And I think as I grew up, I got frustrated with the patronising left-wing attitude that the government knows best about how you should live your life rather than you do. And I had that at school. I had a lot of left-wing teachers sort of telling me that Mrs. Thatcher was dreadful and the miners' strike was, an act of, nobility, etc., etc. And I gradually thought, well, it feels like Mrs. Thatcher's on the side of Britain, that our country's getting better. And I began to move away from left-wing politics. I did join the Liberal Democrats briefly
in my teenage and in your student years.
In my teenage years, because it was in North East Leeds, it wasn't very acceptable to be a Conservative. There was a kind of thing about being a Conservative. So I thought the Liberal Democrats believed in freedom. I was not right about that, and in particular, I remember them talking about putting up taxes, and I just thought that was really wrong. I thought people were already paying enough tax. I didn't want to see the government get any bigger. And I went to university, I met some Conservatives, I realised that actually they shared the same ideas that I did. And I joined the Conservative Party when I was 21.
I mean, you'll be seen as being on the right of the party, not just a Brexiteer, but also as a free marketeer. But a crucial part of that is that you want to get not just this Brexit deal, a free trade deal with the European Union after we leave, if we leave, but also deals with other big countries like the United States, with whom we already do. Again, this is something that Remainers don't seem to understand. We do huge amounts of business with the United States without a deal of any sort.
If we take cars, for example, we sell £12 billion worth of cars to the EU. We sell £8 billion worth of cars to the US.
How on earth do you do that without a trade deal?
Well, exactly. So on WTO terms, we're already selling £8 billion worth of cars, which is 2/3 of the amount of cars we're selling to the EU. So with a trade deal, of course, we'll be able to do even more trade. But it does point to the fact that we can have a free trade deal with the EU. We can carry on selling all of those cars, and the British car industry is a massive success story. I went to Aston Martin earlier this week. Difficult job of driving the Aston Martin round, checking out the new James Bond edition. But that company, 1/3 of all the cars they're selling are into the US because there's huge demand. But can you imagine how many more we'd be able to sell if we got a trade deal with the US?
If you had to choose between a trade deal, a comprehensive trade deal with the EU or with the United States, and many people are saying, look, in terms of regulatory alignment, in terms of what will be demanded by Donald Trump and by Brussels, there might have to be a choice between those two things. Do you think there is a choice that has to be made? And if there is, which side would you go down on?
Well, I think it's the opposite. I think when we conduct the trade deals, the trade negotiations at the same time with the EU and the US, we can be saying to the EU, well, this is what the US have offered us, and we can say to the US, this is what the EU offers us. And what that will mean is we get the best deal for Britain.
You think it doesn't have to be an either or?
No, not at all. And we're negotiating trade deals for the first time in 46 years. We've got the ability, everybody wants to export into the UK market. It's the 5th largest economy in the world. We import a lot of goods from other countries. So we are a prized asset. And we can use that to our advantage. It's called leverage. We can get the best deal from the Japanese, from the EU, from the US.
Are you worried about how long it's going to take, though? Because we're constantly told by the Remain side, it takes 8 years to do a trade deal with Canada or with Japan. A lot of criticism, but actually that's the problem with the EU's negotiating rather than intrinsic amount of time it takes to do those deals. But we're going to need those deals to happen very quickly, aren't we? Are you confident you can do that?
Australia frequently strikes trade deals within a year. The US has just negotiated a revised deal with Mexico and Canada. They've done that within a year. So it's perfectly possible.
Is it where there's a political will?
Absolutely. And my point is, if we're negotiating all these deals in parallel, those countries are going to want to be the first to strike a deal with us. They're going to want the best deal. They're not going to want to see, the EU aren't going to want to see the Americans get more out of a deal with us, so they're going to be more likely to come to the table. So we've got a huge advantage in negotiating all these deals at the same time.
Are you at all concerned about an economic cost? I mean, and a hit to the UK economy as a result of Brexit, whether it's a deal or a no deal? Lots of the focus has been on the terrible traumas awaiting us for a no-deal Brexit. Now there's a Brexit deal on the table. Now it's all focused on, even with a Brexit deal, there'll be this hit to the economy. Do you accept that there will be any financial hit to the country? And if so, are you worried about it?
No, I don't. I think with this deal that Boris Johnson has negotiated, we can have a free trade deal with the EU that will protect tariff-free access for our exporters. But at the same time, we lose that regulatory straitjacket we're in, which means we're more flexible to be able to negotiate with the rest of the world. And of course, make the decisions that are right for the British economy. So there are areas, for example, like financial services, technology, where we can do things differently from the EU. I mean, London is by far the biggest financial centre on the,
I thought everyone was going to be in Frankfurt by now.
But they're not, are they? And we've just had a recent announcement that we do more fintech deals than New York. We're not just beating Europe, we're beating America, we're beating Asia. And the greater flexibility we have to decide the future of our financial services industry, that's going to help us grow the economy. And I think one of the things that these various forecasts don't take into account is all the new options we have. Because once you're not part of a bloc, once you can make your own decisions, you can be more nimble, you've got more options about what to do.
Of course, that's one of the concerns on the Remain side and on the left, this idea of going for sort of deregulation, being a big issue for the Labour Party, about workers' rights, environmental standards and the like. Big concerns about, the NHS being on the table for a deal with Donald Trump. Chlorinated chicken is going to kill us all off. What are your concerns there?
Well, I just think it's a ludicrous idea that women in Britain need the EU to fight for us and we don't fight for our own rights. The things that we've done, whether it's equal pay, whether it's rights for married women, independent taxation was brought in by Mrs. Thatcher. Before that, married women used to have to be on their husband's
I can remember my mum complaining about having to get her husband to sign up for tax return.
This was done by a British woman Prime Minister. Why do we think that British women aren't capable of standing up for our own rights? Why do we need the people in Europe? I just find it a ludicrous idea that we're not capable of deciding what works for us.
So you're saying that there might be deregulation and in different regulations, and there might be higher or lower standards, but is the key argument there that that's a decision by a British government elected by the British people?
Absolutely. And I believe that we can do things differently and we can do things better. So one of the things we'll be doing, for example, is banning live animal exports, which is currently allowed under the EU because we have very high standards of animal welfare here in Britain. Of course, we will protect the NHS. The NHS is not on the table in any trade deal with any other country in the world. We make those decisions, we decide, and we will walk away if the deal isn't good enough. So if the deal with the EU isn't good enough, we can walk away. If the deal with the US isn't good enough, we can walk away. If the Japanese offer us a bad deal, we can walk away. It's our choice.
If we walk away from the EU, again, we're looking at a no-deal Brexit. No deal. We were told by Jeremy Corbyn when the Labour Party officially, although not all the Labour MPs voted for a general election, and said, on the basis that Jeremy Corbyn said, well, no deal is now taken off the table. It's not off the table, is it? No deal is still a possibility in December 2020. It is the table. So it's still a possibility. Would you like a no-deal Brexit?
I want a good free trade deal with the EU, and I absolutely believe that that's what they want too. And of course, we'll have to negotiate in a robust way with the EU, in the same way we'll negotiate in a robust way with the US. And I don't think the EU would want us doing a deal with the US and them not having a free trade deal. So I think we've got a real opportunity to get the best deal for British business.
And any concerns about chlorinated chicken? Everyone on my show who talks about the fear of chlorinated chicken, I always think, have you had buffalo wings on holiday in America? You've lived to tell the tale. This is something that this is on social media all the time. It's brought up in virtually every interview when we talk about a trade deal with the United States. Is that going to be damaging, this idea that we're going to be importing food that's got lower standards of animal welfare and health?
We're going to maintain our food safety standards, our animal welfare standards, and we are going to get the best deal for Britain. It's back to what you were talking about earlier, Julia, this lack of national self-confidence. Why do people think that we are not going to be able to assert ourselves in these deals internationally? Australia and New Zealand are capable of negotiating good trade deals. They're great countries, but they're far smaller than Britain. Of course we can get good deals.
Does a lot of this come about from an opinion? Again, we've talked earlier about sort of an opinion that Britain is somehow hasn't got a major place in the world. It isn't a player, but also a lack of understanding of how trade deals work and how international trade and indeed any commerce works. Yeah. This idea that they say Germany or France are going to want to stop doing business with us, when the reality is most trade happens quite regardless of governments, doesn't it? People want to buy. They see something on the internet or in a shop, they want to buy it. It doesn't really matter where the government what the government thinks about it, as long as it's freely available.
Exactly, and I'm a free marketeer because I believe that the best decisions are made by people who come up with ideas, create companies, create wealth, create jobs. That's what makes our society and economy work, by allowing people to unleash their natural talent and create goods and services. What international trade is about doing that on a bigger scale. So why should it be the case that if I'm exporting, boohoo.com exports its clothes to the US, but currently it faces a tariff of over 10%. Now, if we do a trade deal with the US, that could mean that Boohoo could export its clothes for zero. What would that mean? More people get employed in Manchester. That's great news for our economy, and that's what trade is all about. It's all about businesses, people with great ideas, great products, being able to sell them overseas without the red tape, without the barriers.
Now, you talk very positive terms. I mean, that's your job as International Trade Secretary, of course. But you, as I mentioned earlier, you do inspire quite a lot of anger on the opposite benches. I say, very much a Marmite character. There's a lot of talk about abuse in politics at the moment. A number of female MPs have said that they're actually going to stand down, not stand the next election, because of the abuse that they've had. Do you get much personal abuse? Do you get it on Twitter? Do you get letters? Do you get emails to your surgery or to the ministry? And what effect does it have on you, if any?
So on Twitter, I only read the comments of people I follow, because I believe that I wouldn't go into a pub and just have somebody having a go at me and just sit there and take it. Of course I wouldn't. I'm only going to listen on Twitter to the people who are capable of having a reasonable conversation. And I think we've got to be very careful, because I'm a believer in free speech and I'm a believer in robust political debate. And I mentioned one of the reasons I got excited about politics when I was growing up is there was robust political debate. And there is a bit of an idea that we're suddenly in this era where there's lots of political mudslinging. Political mudslinging's been going on forever. Nye Bevan said that Conservatives were lower than vermin. In the 1980s, some of the vitriol slung at Mrs. Thatcher was pretty extreme. And
you don't think anything's really changed?
I don't really think it has. I think social media has obviously spread it more. But I think those fundamental antagonisms, the battle of ideas, has been something that has gone on for years. And I think whilst I obviously don't support abuse or people, incitement to violence and those terrible things, we've got to be careful not to be too censorious of people having a genuine political debate. And I think one of the frustrations of the British public is that there's a certain amount of censoring of what it's acceptable to say.
Yeah.
And that is a big problem, because if you sweep people's views under the carpet,
people talking about concerns about immigration for years, just been written off as racist.
It was an unacceptable subject. Yeah. And what happened, it was not properly discussed in Parliament.
But isn't the key issue here, it's only censorious on one side? So we had that ridiculous conversation across the nation about whether or not it was awful for Boris Johnson to talk about a surrender under the Benn Act, and how this was terrible, terrible language, and as a leaver, and how awful this was, and how this engendered this terrible political climate. After 3.5 years of leavers being called racist, xenophobes, ignorant, uneducated, fascists, every word under the sun. The censoriousness only happens in one direction, I find.
There is this belief on the left that they have the moral high ground, that somehow
the nasty party.
all of their sort of views are done through the best of intentions, so they can kind of get away with saying stuff that those on the right get slagged off or extricated for over the words they use and the language they use. And one of the things I think we do have to do as Conservatives is be more self-confident about our beliefs. Because I'm a Conservative because I believe it is best. Giving people freedom of their own lives, people taking responsibility is best for them and it's best for our country. And that's how people in Britain want to live. I think people don't like being told what to do. I think that's a large motivation behind the Brexit vote. I think it's a large motivation behind why people are frustrated with politics at the moment, and they don't like, the nanny state, and they don't really like being told what to do. So I think that that sometimes some Conservatives have been a bit too keen to apologise for those beliefs and say, oh, well, maybe we're a bit wrong, maybe we should cross-dress a bit with some Labour policies. And I think we're going to win this election by being confident about our beliefs.
And in coming back to the abuse, do you think some of the MPs who complain about the abuse they get, I mean, no, never acceptable people to threaten rape or killing or anything like that, but some of the digs that people have for perhaps betraying, for instance, their promises at the last general election about delivering Brexit, this is basic politics here. Do you think they're being a bit snowflakey?
I certainly think there are some times when a legitimate argument is made, and rather than people argue against the argument, they instead say it's unfair that the point's even been put. And I think that is a threat to free speech. And I think we need to be very careful about that as a country. We need to be open about the disagreements we have. Of course, they should be respectful. We shouldn't have threats of violence and so on. But I think that.
But there does seem to be a lot more focus when there is someone on the left or on the Remain side who is barracked. We saw that awful scenes of Anna Soubry being followed back into Parliament some months ago and being barracked by people. But again, no physical threat to her whatsoever. And yet there have been some really very aggressive behaviour towards Conservatives or other leaders, and say Nigel Farage, for instance, and that almost gets laughed off by the same people who don't like someone shouting at someone.
I think it is what is sauce for the goose should be sauce for the gander. Okay. I think it should be, I think we should have a robust level of political debate in this country. And this country has a huge tradition of free speech. It's one of the things that's made us successful, and we lose that at our peril.
One of, I think, the really big surprises for me in terms of Boris Johnson's cabinet appointments was not that you were International Trade Secretary, but that you were given the Equalities brief as Minister for Women and Equalities. As someone who, like me, doesn't really sign up to the idea of women as perpetual victims, which seems to be what modern feminism is about.
We are 52% of the population, so I see us as the majority, not the minority.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of idea that women are always put upon, gender pay gap, all of these different issues. Was that a brief that you wanted to take on? Because I don't see it as a very easy fit, given the sort of role that being the Equalities and Women's and Equalities Minister is.
I see it as an opportunity to do things differently. Because I think there's been too much identity politics in Britain. There's been too much of, you think this thing because you're a woman or you're part of this group and, we want you to do X, Y, or Z. I would much rather see individuals being allowed to succeed regardless of their gender, their sexuality, their race. And that's the way I'm approaching this brief. So we've got to get away from this idea that somebody should be appointed to a job, because no one wants to be the token woman. You don't want to feel like you've been appointed to a job because you've got boobs. Likewise, no one wants to be the token gay person. And I think that we need to think differently about this. I think there's been too much ground ceded to the left on identity politics, and we need to reassert the value of individual talent and character above the particular type of group you might happen to be a member of.
There's a very big difference, isn't there? People not missing out because of their skin colour, their race, their sexuality or whatever it is, and someone, as you say, getting the job for it. Do you think that, I suppose that the Ministry for Equalities, Women and Equalities, is the right name for that ministry then?
Well, I think we could, that's what it's called at the moment. But what I see it as is it should be the department freeing people to do what they want to do with their lives. So it should be the Ministry for Freedom. Exactly, being able to make those own choices, not being restricted because they're a woman or because they're gay or because they're from a particular ethnic minority. So what I'm going to be focusing on is removing those barriers to success. So what is it holding people back? Where are the stereotypes that are preventing people having opportunities, rather than trying to classify people in groups?
Okay, and one of the other issues that has come under that brief, of course, is the Gender Recognition Act. And again, a lot of this has sort of passed by under the radar. I've certainly talked about it a lot on my talk radio show, and this is about trans rights and the right to basically say, if you're born biologically a man, to say without any medical intervention, any surgery or anything, to simply say, certify that you are a woman, you are a trans woman, and to have that recognised in law without anything happening as a result of that. The reality, of course, this means that women-only spaces, refuges, prisons for women, and changing rooms and like could see biological men in those places legally allowed to be there. Now, people might feel very pro-trans rights, but they also might, like me, have a teenage daughter and think, I'd really rather not have a man in the changing rooms at Topshop, thank you very much. What is the status of the Gender Recognition Act right now?
So we are currently looking at the results of the consultation from the Gender Recognition Act. One thing I'm very keen to do is make sure we protect single-sex spaces. That is really, really important. And at the same time, of course, if grown adults want to make a decision to transition, that is perfectly, that is a perfectly good decision, and we should support those decisions and prevent bullying and harassment of trans people. But it is also important that we make sure that we protect single-sex spaces. And also, when children are growing up, before they're fully capable of making decisions, we should be very careful about how we guide those children, the opportunities that they're given. So I'm a great believer that once somebody is an adult, they should have full freedom to live their life as they want to live it. And they shouldn't be harassed, they shouldn't be victimised. Everybody should have those opportunities and those choices. But I think it's a different issue when somebody is growing up. So those are the things that I'm looking very carefully at, because we don't want to make any precipitate decisions on this.
We have seen a massive growth in children supposedly transitioning, and of course this often renders them infertile, and again decisions being made from a very, very young age, even as young as 3. You're not happy about that going ahead?
Well, I am very concerned about children when they're developing making irreversible decisions. I think there's a great difference between somebody who is an adult being able to make decisions about their future. I'm a great believer in the best people to make decisions about you is you, but you have to be fully developed in terms of your decision-making capability. And that's why we protect children in all kinds of ways, because they're not yet fully able to make those types of decisions.
And just finally, we've got a Speaker's election after John Bercow steps down. One of the candidates, Harriet Harman, a former Labour Deputy Leader, her shtick for the election has been, vote for me, I'm a woman, there hasn't been a woman other than, since Betty Boothroyd, and it's time for me to be elected as Speaker because I'm a woman. Can you imagine ever seeking a job, whether it's as party leader, as Prime Minister or any other job, because you're a woman?
Never. I just think it's a bad argument to use. Of course, women should have every opportunity to go for those jobs, but it's surely because of somebody's character, somebody's abilities that we should select them for a job, not whether they're a man or a woman. And I always think, look at it the other way. If Harriet Harman was a man, would she really be saying, well, we need a male speaker? Would it ever be acceptable to say that? No, it wouldn't. Can you imagine any job somebody saying, you've got to vote for me because I'm a man? No. And we shouldn't accept one set of rules for women and one set of rules for men, because that is arguing against equality. So, for example, there are some people, I remember the leader of the Green Party, claiming that we should have an all-female cabinet on the grounds it would be more caring and compassionate. I don't believe that for an instance. It's sexist to say that women are more caring and compassionate, in the same way it's sexist to say that men are naturally stronger or better leaders. So I think it's a hypocritical argument to say there are qualities that women have that men don't have, and vice versa.
Do you think you'd make a good leader of the party? Of the Conservative Party, a good Prime Minister?
Well, we've got a fantastic Prime Minister at the moment, and I'm going to be working very hard over the next few weeks to get him the majority that he deserves. But am I an aspirational person? Yes, I am. Do I want to continue in the working in the government? Of course I do. But I will work in any way, shape, or form that is going to deliver on our ambitions for Britain.
Okay, International Trade Secretary Liz Truss, thank you very much
Thank
indeed for talking to me here on the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. So if you've enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to share it on Twitter, on Facebook, everywhere else, using the hashtag JHB Show. Don't forget to like, to comment, to review, and most importantly, subscribe so you don't miss the next show. It's also the best way of making sure other people do get to hear about the conversation. Until next time, thank you very much indeed.